All right. Well, we're coming up on about 3:35, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. If my colleagues don't mind hopping on, we'll do a quick welcome and some introductions of the Odo team here. Thank you, everyone. Just wanted to say hello and thank you all for coming today. This is our first on-camera or advisory committee meeting in several months. We've been doing it just a little bit differently lately, but as always, it's nice to get back and join up with our committee members as well as the public. We've got a couple of different things to go through today. We're having a little bit of a different type of a meeting today where we're going to cover items that we usually cover in the advisory committee. And then, as many people know, we've had some proposed rule changes based on approved statutory changes to the CREP program. And so we decided to extend this meeting just a little bit. So towards the end, we're going to have some additional time for some public commenting. That's going to be at that point isolated to the rule change proposals. That's going to be a part of the presentation that my colleague James is going to be doing here a little bit later on. But before we get going, just want to introduce myself and the colleagues here from Odo. My name is Jason Knauf, and I'm the Senior Incentive Analyst for the CREP program. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to my colleague Patricia, also in the CREP program now, who's just recently been hired to come into that position. So go ahead, Patricia.
I am Patricia. I am here to help with the CREP program, but I'm also helping with the background of the webinar. So if you have some issues or need some help, please put something in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Deward?
Hi, I'm Deward Headley. I was formerly in Patricia's position as an analyst on the CREP program, and I'm currently the manager for energy incentives at Odo.
Yeah, James.
Hi, James Kogel, policy analyst here at Odo, working across a number of the programs, and I'm also the administrative rule coordinator, so I'll be talking about the program rules a little later on. I'll pass it over to Christy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Splitt. I'm the Oregon Department of Energy's Government Relations Coordinator, but also helped kick off the CREP program, and it will always have a special place on my to-do list, so glad to be here today.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and take it to Pandian.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pandian Krishnaswamy. I'm the Assistant Director for Energy Development Services Division. Welcome to the Advisory Committee meeting. Back to you, Jason and Christy.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and jump into the next slide, please. Real quick before we get going, as always, we're just going to go through a couple of meeting logistics. And just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that we are recording today's meeting, and it will be posted online afterwards. And feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions. Patricia is monitoring the chat, and we'll probably utilize that a little bit more when we get into the public comment period. And as always, if you have a question, even advisory committee members, please use the raise hand function to indicate that so that we can get you set up to ask your question. And as always, we sort of have two public comment periods for this one. We're going to go through the advisory committee portion, and then we'll have some both advisory committee time to discuss items on the agenda, as well as then any public comments related to the meeting. And then, as I said before, we'll have an extended time to get exclusively into public comments on the proposed rule changes for the CREP program. And if you have any questions, Patricia is in the background to be able to help you with any tech issues. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I'm just going to leave this up as kind of our general slide so that you can look to see how to operate WebEx in this capacity on your screen for responses, asking a question, or use of the chat. We'll just leave that up for just a moment. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And as always, just want to be sure that how we're going to facilitate this meeting is that we do have as panelists our advisory committee and the Odo staff that just introduced themselves a moment ago. And as I said, there's going to be time reserved for public comment on the agenda of today's meeting and then the follow-up for the rule changes. And as always, we really like to begin these meetings before we jump in by talking about our community agreements. And these are designed to foster inclusive and a respectful meeting. We just want to have everybody just follow along and agree to being present and ready to learn from the information provided and comments from any particular individual, as well as including respect into that in your communication and responses. And just like to remind folks that learning often happens outside of our comfort zones, and we can be okay with that and include that in our discussions. And then listening to learn and not just only to respond. And just want to thank everybody. As always, we're doing these online things. The gremlins, the technical gremlins can pop up at any time. And if we have that, please be patient. We'll definitely try to work around that. And as I said before, if you have any particular technical issue or request beyond just a comment, please chat Patricia. She's available to help you with that. And so with that, we will dive into our agenda briefly on the next slide, please. So in this meeting, we're going to, as we wrap up this aspect, we're going to dive into going over some possible legislative concept changes. Christy's going to give a breakdown on that. We are going to, because Christy actually does need, I believe, to exit this meeting a little bit early. We are going to have a quick little time for advisory committee comments and questions for Christy about this concept change. So it's another little change in our normal format. And then from there, we're going to just do a brief CREP program update, very briefly on our current grantees and some of the highlights, as well as a quick update on where we're at in the round 3 process. And then, of course, we're going to go into James. He's going to do a presentation and breakdown of the proposed rule changes for the CREP program. And then, as I said before, we're going to get into some committee feedback and discussion on this advisory portion. And then some public commentary on both the meeting today and the proposed rule changes. And with that, I'm going to toss it over to my colleague, Christy.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here talking about this today. So I kind of want to start by just noting that in a minute, you're going to hear about recent changes to the program that already passed through the legislature that I know Jason wrote you about during or right before the legislative session. One thing I think we at the Oregon Department of Energy have is an attitude of just wanting to make sure that we're constantly improving our programs to make sure they work best for the people who are using them. So in this case, the eligible entities for our program, for the Community Renewable Energy Program, includes public bodies, consumer-owned utilities, which, by the way, most consumer-owned utilities are public bodies, but we wanted to loop in the cooperatives who are not public bodies as well. So consumer-owned utilities are listed out as well. Tribes are listed out as well. And we know that we've been getting plenty of applications from public bodies and from tribes, but our consumer-owned utilities from the beginning of the program development have raised some questions and concerns about the program. And so one of the things that they brought to our attention really from the very beginning was concern about the definition of the energy resilience projects that we have for our program. And that's because our definition of energy resilience in our program includes a renewable energy aspect. And there are many energy resilience projects that are out there that a lot of our utilities would like to be able to complete or find funding to help with completion, or with planning for that matter, I suppose, don't have necessarily a renewable component. There's also an issue in some of our consumer-owned utility territories where they can't actually add more renewables to their grid because of their contract with the Bonneville Power Administration to be one of their power providers. So it kind of creates the situation where the program was designed to include them very intentionally, but in many cases they feel like it's a program that doesn't work for them. And we've been hearing about that and thinking about ways that we could potentially make some changes in the future, really since the inception of the program. And we heard about a situation with federal funding that needed some attention. And this was sort of the idea that we put forward to the governor's office. And one thing I want to be really clear about is that's where we are in the phase on our legislative concepts right now. Right now, we've shared our ideas for legislative concepts with the governor's office, and we don't yet have a red light, a green light, a yellow light on any of those. We're just waiting to hear back. So it could be that they decide we're not going to move forward with this concept. But for now, since we did put it forward, we wanted to be really transparent with you and really take a minute to get feedback from you all about the idea. Right now, every project under CREP must have a renewable energy component, and at least 50% must have a resilience component. And the possible legislative concept we put forward is that up to 20% of funds could support resilience-only projects. And this also dovetails with our recent county energy resilience planning grants that we have. And it also dovetails with federal funding. And I'll tell you a little bit more about each of those. So right now, we just opened up a program where every county in the state can do an energy resilience plan, and we'll provide a grant to help support crafting that plan. This passed in legislation in 2023. And I believe it was House Bill 3630. And then when those plans are done, they in many cases will include ideas for projects to increase resilience. And there's not a pot of money that's available for such work that's out there now. At the state level, at least. There are some related programs. There's a Resilience Hubs program at the Department of Human Services, but the amount of money is like not that great. It'll probably be expended pretty quickly, things like that. So the idea that we had was and then the other piece of it has to do with federal funding and consumer-owned utilities. There's a grid resilience program from the federal government that actually has a match of 33% for resilience projects for the utilities to meet. So they can get access to a lot of federal funds that could help them complete projects to help with safety in their communities, to help keep the lights on in the first place. But they can't access those funds without a 30% match. And we have a lot of consumer and utilities where like raising that 30% match is a real barrier. So it means they won't be able to take advantage of the federal program. And so we thought we could potentially take a look at this idea of offering up to 20% of the funds to support those resilience-only projects to serve both the needs of counties and the communities served by those counties for ideas for resilience projects after planning grants, and to help with that match issue that some of our smaller COUs are experiencing with the Grid Resilience Federal Funding Program. So that's the basic pitch here, why we were thinking about doing this. Really, hopefully I've gone through that in enough detail that it makes sense, but I really want to hear your questions and comments. So that time is now. I actually don't have to go anywhere. I'm planning to be on the call, so I'll be here for the public comment later. But I just think while it's fresh, before we dive into the rules and like let the two things get confused, I thought it might be helpful to just talk about any questions or concerns. And I know we've got, I think, 4 members of our advisory committee on the line. Shannon's got her hand up, and we'd just love to hear from you. So with that, I'm happy to hear from Shannon and then open the door to anyone else.
Thanks, Christy. Am I coming across okay?
Perfectly. It's nice to hear your voice.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad we popped in. I guess my knee-jerk reaction is just thinking back to the inception of this program, which was as a very, very, very modest cutout that was negotiated through HB 2021 so that we had some certainty about funding directed specifically to renewable energy projects within our state boundaries. And that was coming out of a long and arduous and sometimes painful negotiation just about how any certainty would be brought to HB 2021 for projects to be built in state. So given broader framework and history, and also the knowledge that it is a very aggressive and competitive active grant program, I'm feeling some concerns about redirecting any of those critical funds away from renewables specific.
Yep. Good to hear that, Shannon. I think that's in part why we're looking at taking chunk of the money and not having it compete alongside, or, you know, make sure that we still protect the vast majority of the funding for those purposes, of course. But we'd be open to hearing if there's like ideas about lowering, maybe it's 10% or something like that. I mean, we're open to any ideas, but definitely hear that point and want to maintain that it's a renewable energy program and resilience, and not move it or shift it from that. But I totally hear you. And competition for the funds is a real issue.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else have any questions or concerns? Well, I'm happy to move things forward, but my door is open to ideas for, I guess I maybe should have said this part out loud too, kind of two things on this that I didn't say out loud that were considerations for us bringing this idea forward, in addition to just sort of the, like the ones that are like closest to the actual, like, here's issues we have with the program and how it gets up. One thing is we were thinking about bringing this as a new program, and it seemed to us to be a lot more efficient to like nest it into an existing program that's successful and has infrastructure and serves many of the same groups already. So I think that we'd be interested in, like, you know, potentially more funding for the program to help with this or something like that to kind of make it pencil. So that it doesn't feel like a loss to the renewables community, but we're just trying to think about like a separate program. It's just, I think a lot of us now in recent years have been through the process of setting up new programs, and it is just so much work. And sometimes it feels like almost inefficient. Like, why don't we just have like one heat pump program? Why do we have two, for example? So I think that's another reason we were thinking, like, this serves the same audience. We already have things up and running. Could we fold this in? So, so just know that that's on our radar too. So like if they're, I think there's like no way to say like, let's not move the LC unless we know what the budget is, because that doesn't really like work with the legislative timeline. But that if we could, that's how we would do it. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Like if there's more money, then we could put it here, and only 20% of it, you know? So anyway, yeah. Oh, Jenna's saying we have 3 heat pump programs at the Department of Energy. I think we have 2, but we'll have 3 soon. Oh, in Oregon, we have way more than 3 in Oregon. I'm eligible for 8 in my house in Southwest Portland. So yeah, it's like kind of wild. It's frustrating, really, frankly. All right, but with that, I'm happy. Audrey's got her hand up now. Hey, Audrey, how's it going?
Hi, I had a suggestion of something else that I wanted to bring up, but I don't know if it's not related to this specifically, but I didn't know, I didn't see on the agenda when the best time for me to go ahead and do that would be.
I'm fine with you doing it now. Does it
Okay.
relate to like something that would be legislative?
Well, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
So I'm with PGE, and the grant requires letters from the utility to be submitted with the applications, and we got kind of a avalanche of very last minute letter requests that was very administratively challenging and onerous. And I was wondering if there was any way that we could put language, suggestions. I don't know if it has to be a requirement, but just some advance notice on the information people have to give utilities and how much advance notice they need to provide to get that. Because we have to do interconnection reviews, which can require like desk engineering reviews, and we just don't do that at the snap of a finger.
Yeah, Audrey, the within our rules, we ask the applicants that they can show consultation with the utilities about the project. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this letter format. We're even accepting emails, communications that this is going on, kind of precursory communications. I think a lot of applicants have almost assumed as if they were supposed to get an official letter from their utility, which is where we wind up with that avalanche that's come in, because it is required to show that consultation. I'm glad that you brought it up. There's some other pieces about this that the program team we're going to be addressing once we get through this sort of crazy period before we move into subsequent rounds. we're actually going to move into trying to look into that, providing some clarification on some of the items based on what was required in statute, because this was actually a statutory requirement, this consultation, that made it into the rules, but there was never any specified guidance of how that had to come in. And we've done a lot to go deeper into our other required items to create that guidance. And based on this round and subsequent rounds, we definitely see the need to go and try to respell this out a little bit better for applicants on what we're looking for versus what the utilities can even provide at this point in time in a project cycle as when it comes to the feasibility.
Yeah, and we're happy to do it. And it's actually pretty useful on our side to receive information ahead of time, but maybe like a form or something like that to just kind of guide what information is wanted from you guys, because they're not doing a full interconnection review. That's not something, but we are definitely taking a hard look at system protection and making sure that if somebody receives a grant, we are not going to decline the interconnection application, because nobody wants that to happen. But to do that system protection review is kind of what I'm talking about, is depending on the size of the project, could take longer or shorter, could be more complex, less complex. And there were some very large ones that came through.
Okay. Yeah, I think as we dive deeper into this, this feels like something that we might want to get a few of our utility reps together, try to find out sort of what is that process for you, what is the from even the COUs to the IOUs, what are the process and what are you really providing versus what we're really needing at that time, as well as what information would be valuable to you from a project that's being a proposed project, not an actual at this point, and then formulate some guidance, because I know all of the utilities are going to have separate pieces about what this really means, what it entails, what we're asking for, what's good for them to have at this point in time as it's in a proposed state. So I think it's a great example. We were looking at doing that guidance, but that'll even be more beneficial if we are able to touch base with our utility reps and
yeah, happy to help with our thoughts on our side if it would be useful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Audrey. Yeah, that's something that's been in there. It's on one of my famous post notes on my desk, actually. We need to address this.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. And I think it's a rule thing.
It's a statutory and rule thing, yeah.
Statute has something, but it doesn't have like a letter. It's like loose on what it looks like. So I remember us trying to figure out what it needs to look like.
Even rule doesn't have, rule says that that's one of the options is a letter. But it's built upon consultation with the utility and stakeholders for feasibility.
Yeah. Great. Well, with that, I don't see any other hands up for me. Oh, wait, Shannon's back. Hi, Shannon. Come on back.
Hi, sorry, being a pest here. I'm trying.
You're great.
I'm trying to unpack and better understand, and I know this is a whole other long hour-and-a-half conversation, but about what that BPA restriction is to the COUs. We're working with a couple, and we've definitely come up upon their own 25 kW metering limits, but this is clearly something else that you're talking about.
No, it's the same thing. They can only have a certain percentage of renewables on their system. So it's not just net metering. It's like just a certain amount that they can have. And back when this program was still first being built, I could tell you like the percentage or the amount they were allowed to have. But because of residential solar, many utilities are like at their cap with BPA. And so they can't add more renewables without being in violation of their contract. And it's something we actually have on our list. Some of our staff are doing like a let's ask BPA questions sort of thing.
Good.
It's on our list because they're doing their new provider of choice contract process. Yeah. And we're just sort of curious if there might be some movement on that, because we get calls from, kind of unrelated to this program, and hopefully this is useful information for others on the line and of interest, but we'll get calls from I remember specifically the Dows. We've had a few calls that have kind of accidentally fallen my way in the years past. And it was the Dows specifically where there was a solar provider doing a lot of work to like get interest. And then the homeowners were calling us to be like, our utility says we can't. Like, what can you do to fix this? Like, it was like an organized campaign to like call us to try to like fix the law, only it's not us, it's BPA, it's federal. So yeah, so it's definitely like an issue, not just for large, well, in this, I'm not saying large, these are large compared to a rooftop solar on a residence project. So these larger, small scale projects like in CREP, versus like residential, they're even bigger, right? So then it's even more of a challenge for them to fit into the resource mix for some of those localities.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I guess you just unearthed another priority policy.
Yeah, it's
Objective.
definitely an interesting
Okay.
issue.
Thanks.
Yep. And those contracts last a long time, and the one that is currently in place has been in place for a long time too. So it was like, you know, back when that seemed like a lot of renewables, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So we need to get Granholm to pull BPA into shape. Got it. Easy peasy.
Yeah, no problems. Thanks, Shannon. And now I really think I'm happy to come back if anybody has any other comments or questions, and I'll put my email address in the chat if anyone wants to reach out that way too.
Wonderful. All right, well, we'll go ahead and if you think of questions about the legislative change concept, we can jump back into that in the comment period a little bit later on as well. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and jump in as a quick summary for our first 2 rounds of CREP. And this is just a really, really big overview, is that in our planning projects, the ones you see on the left side of the screen, these are the planning projects that have actually gone all the way through the grant process and their grants are completed with their final disbursements, have been paid out. And I believe each of those, except for one, is also a round 3 construction applicant. Klamath Community College did something a little different in round 2, or they would be included in this one. And then we have a couple of construction projects that have completely wrapped up. We're just basically pending inspection and a little bit more, a little bit of documentation. But they have notified us they are complete, and we're setting those up. So we'll be into grant complete and project completion on our first 2 construction projects from the program. A lot of our projects are a lot more extended in time, so that's why you're not seeing a lot more of the construction projects coming into completion. And then one of the items that James will be talking about with our proposed rule changes will probably wind up, we believe, are going to accelerate the timelines on a lot of the CREP construction projects, but we'll get to that in a bit. And then, of course, along those lines, about 11 to 13 grantees have started or near completion. And as I said, James will cover that second payment option that's probably going to present faster cycles. If we go to the next slide, please. And as many of you know, on May 10th, we wrapped up the 3rd opportunity round for the CREP program. We had 75 applications submitted, which equated to about 47 million in funds requested. The bucket we had available this round, we actually bumped it up 6 million from 12 million in the first 2 rounds to 18 million in this round. Which was a good thing, because this was the highest number of applications for a CREP round, as well as overwhelming amount of the construction projects that came in, which were a total of 55. 41 of those are resilience projects, and actually we're in the process of doing some information requests, and we had a couple of projects select the wrong category on their application. So we're very likely looking at 43 potential resilience construction projects that would be moving on to competitive review. Along with that, we had 20 planning applications. And as I said before, with a couple of those round 1 planning grants that wrapped up, another really, really piece of exciting news for the program and really showing the efficacy of the program is that 22 of our 33 current planning grantees submitted for construction funding in this 3rd opportunity round. That represents 67% of our current grantees. Some of those have not completed their planning. They're in that final stage of doing their project reports and their final documentation. So that's how they were in a position to have the information necessary to be able to move their projects into construction. So that's very, very exciting. It has also amplified the competitiveness. This has always been an excellent competitive program. But the competitiveness for the projects moving into competitive review has really gone up another notch. We're really excited for getting into that process for this third round. If we could go to the next slide, please. And so as just a quick breakdown, construction resilience recommends or equals out to 35.2 million in requests. Construction renewable sits at about 10.1 in requests. And then planning projects combined represent just a little over 1.5 million in requests. And I'm going to go ahead and toss it to my colleague Patricia for some additional information on round 3.
Okay, next slide, please. For the round 3 applicant type summary, there were the types of organizations that applied were there were 3 tribes, 2 consumer-owned utilities, 7 counties, 24 cities, and 39 other public bodies with a variety of schools, community colleges, water and fire districts. Next slide, please. Energy resilience use cases included a range of responses to energy disruption events, such as heating and cooling for emergency shelters, powering emergency response centers, power for first responder facilities, drinking water availability, and cooling food storage, meaning food banks and distribution facilities. Next slide, please. Notable technologies included solar, battery storage, microgrids, hydrogen, meaning small-scale renewable energy production, storage, and electricity generation for emergency power, biomass, and inline hydro and geothermal exchange. Next slide. And then several of the applications include grid-tied battery storage systems to provide power for peak grid demand periods. Next slide, please.
All right. As we said, we're trying to move it along just a little bit here so we can get into the rule changes as well. But just want to stop for a moment and see if there's any questions that our advisory committees have on the first 2 rounds, or our current grantees, or round 3. So we'll go ahead and give that a moment. And Patricia, you'll have to tell me, I can't see all of the background screens if we have a hand raised or a comment come through.
No questions.
Well, hopefully we can at least get a thumbs up from everybody for the excitement of round 3 and those planning projects coming through, as well as some really, really exciting projects that are coming through for that 3rd round. Patricia had mentioned the hydrogen one, which is a very interesting project, utilizing one of our first instances of utilizing hydrogen as a potential energy storage within one of our projects. So lots of very, very innovative, engaging projects that have come through without giving too much away. A couple of floating solar at wastewater treatment facilities. And then, as Patricia had mentioned, a new influx of battery storage in conjunction with the utilities for demand response during peak periods. So we do have some really, really exciting projects that are coming forward. We can't wait to announce these latest winners when we meet again. But with that, without having any questions there, I want to quickly turn it over to my colleague James to walk through our proposed rule changes for the program. So take it away, James.
Thanks, Jason. All right, I just want to start off with a very brief overview of the previous legislative session for this program. So Senate Bill 1525 from the last session amended the program by including partner costs into what is considered the cost to plan, construct, and install a project. The bill also further defined what is considered an electric cooperative for the purposes of the program. One of the main change was to add in the ability for Odo to release an additional 30% of a grant's funds if the grantee meets certain provisions specified in rule, which we're now in the process of outlining. And I'll kind of outline the whole payment kind of division of payments as well as I go through that rule, so you can see how that additional 30% kind of falls in the program. So when incorporating the amendments to the from this legislative session into administrative rules, Odo is proposing additional language changes to assist in implementing those changes. So with the inclusion of partner costs into the definition of planning and project costs, Odo is proposing to clarify the role of a partner as well. So currently a partner is defined as an entity listed as a partner to an eligible applicant on an application for a grant. And a partner may be a federally recognized Oregon Indian tribe, public body, nonprofit entity, private business with a business site in Oregon, or owner of a rental property in Oregon. Odo is proposing further defining that definition by stating that a partner may assist or take a lead role in the acquisition, installation, construction, or planning of a community renewable energy project, that a partner can have financial or ownership interest in the project. The definition would also clarify that an entity whose only role is provision of goods and services through a procurement contract would not be considered a partner. Also proposing that a written agreement be in place between the applicant and any partner before any release of funds under performance agreement with Odo, for those kind of performance agreements entered into in the future. The written agreement would be required to include certain key provisions from the performance agreement between Odo and the applicant, provisions such as the ability for Odo to inspect the project site or audit documentation. Do any advisory committee members have any questions about the potential rule changes on this slide? And we can circle back to any, if any questions do pop up. Okay, so the amendment to add an additional release of grant funds for construction projects provided the ability for Odo to establish requirements for the release of funds in the rule. Currently, the first 30% of grant funding may be released if upon entering the performance agreement, the applicant demonstrates having taken meaningful steps to seek site control, and having filed a request for interconnection with host utility or appropriate transmission provider, and met any of the requirements provided in the performance agreement, such as kind of demonstrated use of funds, a need for the funds. And so that's the initial 30%, and that's currently what is available for construction projects, with the remaining funds released upon completion of the project and any final reporting requirements. So this additional 30% is going to be the 30% at the beginning once they meet those requirements, and then additional 30% once they meet these proposed requirements. And so the current proposals that we have come up with are that the applicant or partner has fulfilled all the requirements for the release of the first 30%. So that's the filed request for interconnection and taken meaningful steps to seek site control and other requirements in the performance agreement. And then that the grantee demonstrates that they or a partner has incurred a minimum of 25% of projected grant monies on eligible costs prior to requesting this additional funding. So they've already spent some funds on eligible costs. An updated project budget that details eligible and ineligible costs has been provided, just to kind of, so we can assess progress on the project and anticipated future costs for the project. And that the construction or installation of the renewable energy system has started at the project location, or will start no later than 60 days after the submission of the request for grant monies, and not later than the required construction start date in the performance agreement. So that's kind of either it started or it's going to start in the next couple of months. Just so we can see that progress is being made with the project, and then it met any of the requirements provided by the department in the performance agreement. And then the remaining funds, as previously, would be released at the completion of the project. So once it's constructed and operational and commissioned, and we've done the inspection reports, and all the final reporting requirements have been submitted. So, and then they would then review and review those. So do any advisory committee members have any questions about the rule changes on this slide? And so finally, we're also proposing a few other amendments. These are just to outline that fixed costs incurred in the normal course of business, such as existing staff salaries or overhead, would be considered ineligible costs for project construction costs. This is already the case for planning. We just kind of wanted to outline that it would be the case for project costs, the construction costs, and then also to currently we have a requirement in the rules that during the application stage, the applications can't be amended during an open opportunity announcement. We would just kind of with the online application system, we have the ability to allow them to be amended. So this would, if we remove that restriction, we could then allow applications to be amended during an open opportunity announcement. Any questions on this? Or any of the other rules we've gone through? Okay, I will hand it back off to Jason then. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, James. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. We will go ahead and start to move in with, we've sort of had ongoing or in process discussion with our advisory committee. So we are going to keep that open for a couple more minutes to see if there's any questions that have come up from our committee members, and then move on into our public comment period. Just wanted to make sure that that for public comments that you raise your hand ahead of time if you want to make a comment. And we will definitely get to that as we move into that section. And then could you go to the next slide, please? And this one we've already really been doing, but as we go through these meetings, if and when possible, we definitely appreciate it if when you are making a comment and you have that ability to go on camera, if you don't mind turning your camera on while making the comment or during that particular discussion point. And if we could go on, or actually we'll just leave it open right now for committee members if there's any additional comments or discussion pieces or anything outside of what we have chatted about today that you've been wanting to ask the program team. Okay, I'll take that as a good hint that we can go ahead and open the floor up to any of our public that has come into this meeting. And before we answer any of those questions, just want to let the committee members know that our next steps in the program are going to be doing the round 3 competitive review and award announcements. We have adjusted our schedule just a little bit because we did have a very large applicant round. So our capacity, trying to move through our original schedule, making a little bit of adjustments for our internal capacity to handle that and make sure that we have ample time to get all the details necessary for our reviewers. But we still anticipate doing those award announcements the first week of September. As well, we're in continued project tracking and grant project closeouts, as I mentioned earlier. We look to have several more coming through the pipeline over the course of this summer. And then we're also gearing up to start getting everything dialed in for our 4th opportunity round, which we're tentatively slating for maybe mid to late fall. That could even go into winter as well. Just depends on some internal items and processing of round 3 awardees and contracts. And in our next advisory committee, we're going to hold off on determining any date quite yet. We may even, depending on what's going on, may even go back to the email memo format until we get to a place where we have a lot more information to be able to share in one of these video meetings. But what we will be covering again is just program updates to keep you all aware and the completed grantee project updates. As well as hopefully in our next round, we'll have our grantee announcements and our round 4 timeline. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide, please. And we'll go ahead and open the floor up for any public comment on the. We want to keep this one. If there's any comments about the program or the rules, we're going to open the floor up to that. Also want to let advisory committee members know that you certainly are welcome. This was a little bit longer than our normal meeting time, and you are welcome to exit the meeting if need be right now as well. And while we're waiting for a potential question to come in, I know something that had to do with the rule changes that I fielded a couple of questions on from current grantees that are in the program. And this is in regards to the second, or what we're kind of internally calling the in-progress payment option from the rule change, just to make sure we're clarifying that to any current grantees that may be, or partners from current grantee projects that are on right now. Is that once this is all goes through its process with the state and the rules and it's approved, this will be implemented and available for current round 1 and round 2 grantee projects. There'll be some additional pieces that will need to be done in terms of performance agreement amendments to bring it in line, to bring those contracts in line with the new statute and the new rules. But just wanted to make sure we let everybody know this is going to be implemented, and we're going to try to be prepared to handle those requests as they come in.
Still no questions.
We'll go ahead and give it just about another minute here, and if we have no comments, then we'll go ahead and be able to wrap our time up a little bit early today. Also, just wanted to remind the public this, if you had any questions about those, not the rules, but the legislative change concepts that Christy mentioned and presented about earlier, please feel free to ask any questions in that regard as well. You're welcome, Jenna. Give it just a little bit more time. Thanks for being here, Jenny. Nice to see you. All right, Patricia, if you go ahead and go to the next slide. Or James, I'm sorry, thank you. So oftentimes, different questions or different items can pop up after these meetings. Please feel free. We do have a form on the program's website. This is more program applicant question related about the program in the form, but please feel free to use that form if another question comes up, or as always, you can utilize the program's email address. If we could go to the final slide there, that's published here on our final slide at community.grants@energy.oregon.gov. Please feel free to use that or the form to ask any questions that maybe come up after this meeting. But with that, and ironically enough, we had the longest scheduled meeting for an advisory committee, and yet we are actually wrapping up 5 minutes earlier than our normal time. So we wound up buying everybody a half hour back in their day. Just wanted to say thank you for joining. And again, if you have a question or another thing that comes up, please don't hesitate to call upon us, ask us a question. With the program team, we're happy to provide as much information as we can or answer your questions. And with that, just want to say thank you for joining. And thank you to our advisory committee members for taking their time and being a part of the committee for the program. And we'll go ahead and wrap it up at this point. Thank you.